This is day 245 of the Arukh HaShulchan OC. If you'd like to sponsor upcoming shir or more of the Arukh HaShulchan OC, be greatly appreciated. Please contact me directly. Still in Simon Kuf Samaches. Today we're doing Lamed Hey to Mem. So, talking about recooked bread. Lamed Hey. If you cook the bread morsels in boiling water in a kli rishon, whether they become glued together, or not glued together. If there is in every morsel a kazayis, that is called that the morsels are intact. But because mostly you have to make moti and bench. No difference if it has it looks like bread or not, since the morsels are kazayis. That's the Brisa and Yerushalmi who say this way. If the morsels were not cooked, or you glue them together through a soup, or dvash, or honey, or chalov, or milk, or shar mashkin, or the beverages, zenikra chavitza, hipchusa b'mayla. This is a lower level down. I'm sorry. A level down here means more susceptible to motzi, not less susceptible to motzi. After the in baprusas kazayis, even though the morsels do not have a kazayis, motzi, because the Muslim mishlam tell lechem. They I don't know, it's kind of lateral, I guess. You have to make a motzi mosan if they look like bread. Have the amen kazayis, but if they don't have kazayis, gam enlam toar lechem, and they also don't look like bread. Mevarach mezonos u'birkas mein sholosh. They make a burning mezonos and make the bracha of alamicha. B'vishul be'en kazayis, and when you cook them, if there's no kazayis, after yesh toar lechem, even though it looks like bread, mevarach borim minei mezonos mein sholosh, you make mezonos and alamicha. V'zel ma'amar gemara b'chavitza. This is what the Gemara has to say about chavitza. But kol shekain sheyesh bohem kazayis the gam b'bishul and chiluk. Certainly, when they have a kazayis, even in cooking, there is no difference. And loma v'ushav v'loshum dibuk, if it's not cooked nor glued together, ela mefura dak dak, but very much pounded and pulverized. Kamosha kochem matzah u'mnapi mosa b'napish koyim matzah meal. Translates into matzah meal. Abishem b'gazayis l'tor lechem, even though it doesn't have a gazayis, nor does it look like bread. Mevarech alav hamotzi birkas hamazon k'sholchim meveshim. You dry matzah meal, you have to make a hamotzi. Mishnah Berurah says if you leave morsels in a plate and you pour on them boiling water from a kli rishon, if that either kli rishon has a din of bishul or not for the purpose of downgrading to mazonos. Therefore, if the poor morsels are less than kazayis, and they have the countenance of bread, best to make a motzi on another piece of bread and then eat these. Excuse me. The Mishnah Berurah also says that Arukh HaShulchan says that if every morsel has a kazayis in whether they're glued together or not, they have to make a motzi because of muscles. The Mishnah Berurah says not necessarily all of them, but even if there's a kazayis in one morsel, you also make a motzi and birkas hamazon. And then, of course, you can eat the smaller ones as well. But the small morsels, which do not have a kazayis, they're not considered to be you're not considered to be yotzi by the birkas by the hamotzi. And when you're eating them by well, I'm not sure what it means, not considered motzi. But when you eat them by yourself, I guess you eat them like kinuach suda or something, then you have to make a burning mizonos on them. I guess they become like pastries. Lamavav, yesh mishkas b'lashon zeh. Is this a quote evidently from Magen Avram? Amrina b'Gemara. It says in the Gemara, the imperial lechem, if you pulverize the bread, ashim magzim gesos, when it looks like flour again, breadcrumbs. V'achar kach chazer b'gavon yachad, then you then knead them together and bake them again. So Baruch HaMotzi, if you like a tourist of the Namo, you have to make HaMotzi even if it doesn't look like bread. Mikra Piruin, Sheesh Mem Kazayis, because these are called morsels of Shabbat Kazayis. But Kazayis Leboy Lechem, the Kazayis not require a countenance of bread. Mash Masham, I feel Bitukan B'Shemen, B'Tchila. Sounds like even if they're first fried in oil, but then they're baked, then doing nachos like menachos, and they're hamotzi. Okay, Osamos shows him kremzlach, meyalechem before from breadcrumbs, or lechem sharamayim, or bread that's soaked in water. So the hamotzi, and the hamotzi I came and should close lechem since initially was bread. The low nafik mitoras pas, and it doesn't remove. It's not removed from the category of bread. Until the point that each one is less than a kazayis. Lamed Zayin says Arukh HaShulchan about this Magen Avraham. All those words are astonishing. That the breadcrumbs then are glued together. It's considered to be morsels with kazayis. And okay, that's not true. The kosher kodem abishul lo kazayis by pouring any time that be morsels prior to cooking, not the size of kazayis. Even though then they were glued together by the cooking, they're not called that they have a kazayis. Ayin sham. V'agmar shamar the kshpiron because of ears son mevarach hamotzi. Gemara says when you pulverize them and then you went back and kneaded them together, make hamotzi. Peirushosh chazav afon k'mosh piresh Rashi. Ayin sham. It's when you go back and bake it. Like Rashi says, well, yeah, because that's one of the things Magen Avraham said. Whenever it said when you go back and bake it, you have to make when you go back and bake it, you have to make hamotzi, and it seems to be the same thing. But when you go back and you cook them or you fry them, matzah balls which you cook on besa, a kremzlach which you fry in honey or oil. The fact that they're glued together doesn't mean anything. So if you ground up the bread, or breadcrumbs and matzah meal, and you make a batter out of it, and you bake it, then it's hamotzi. By the way, my mother-in-law, she makes Pesach rolls from matzah meal, and first years ago I thought they were hamotzi because they look like rolls, but they're made really with eggs and oil, and therefore the bracha is mezonos like any possible bekistin. But that is the type of thing which were made with water, it would be considered to be hamotzi. Okay, back to Arukh HaShulchan. By kremzlach and by knedlach, since the morsels are less than kazayis, when they then are glued together by cooking ka knedlach, like the matzah balls, like they tigun ka kremzlach, by frying like kremzlach, far over mahem tzuras apas, they no longer have the countenance of bread. They're glued now they're being glued together. It's not called being glued together. And certainly, as I just mentioned by my mother's Pesach rolls, if you mix in them before you cook them, before you fry them, beitzim mishuman, eggs and oil. Ein shum svara fat. Ein shum svara levar motzi. There's no reason to make a motzi. And that is what the Gedolei Achronim write, which seems to be Eliyahu Rabbah, Eben Ozer, and cited by the Machzis HaShekel. And Mishmur Paskins that way as well. But the Mishmur, it's a caveat. If you bake them, you should only eat them during the Suda, unless they were kneaded with a lot of fat or honey, like my mother-in-law's Pesach rolls. Then you make a brayim name mazonos. If you kneaded them with water alone and you bake them, then it has a din of a paskom, or it's absolute bread. Back to Arukh HaShulchan. The king teg chatz shows in Pesach mi matzah shvur l'shvorin ketanim. Teglach, I think they're called also. These are confections made of broken piece of matzah. Shem kol echad min hashvorin kazayis, where each piece is less than kazayis. Maribon baits in b'shuman, and you mix with them oil, eggs and fat. V'achar metanim something you fry them. Upshita shavar me'alem towards the pasta. They obviously do not have the form of bread. Adar pashin shvorchel mezonos. This you certainly make a meals of that. This is the custom of the world. There is no concern about this altogether. This is, of course, halacha by matzah bride. For those who eat, like Arukh HaShulchan applies, those who eat gebroks. In brackets it says here, Avraham seems to note that there's an issue here. But there's not a makam iyun. It's obvious that there's the halacha. Mishnah Berurah says that if you didn't cook the pieces in a pot, but you fried them with some sort of liquid in a frying pan, there are some achronim that it's who consider it to be bread. So he says if it's after frying it looks still like bread, then it's proper to only eat them during the suda. And of course, it's talking about when it was the water with which you kneaded them. Lamaches, b'day, you should know the be'elu sheyotzi mikla birchas hamotzi birchas hamazon. Those which are no longer hamotzi or benching, they bishul because they're cooked, or chibur or glued together, or tigun or fried. Shein b'tzuras paschal, they don't look like bread. I feel achashir kfiyas suda. There's no talak kfiyas suda, and they're not pasabal b'kisnin. Ain't tzarich hamotzi birchas hamazon. Now borim minei mezonos. The only name borim mezonos ubirchas me'ein sholosh and alamichya. Zeish bar kfiyas suda tzarich lebarich. Motzi ubirchas hamazon, that which we know when you kaveh suda, you have to make a motzi birchas hamazon. Zel b'tor pas afuya. That's if it looks like bread. It looks baked. Kamo kichlach, puter kuchen, like kichlach and pound and butter cake, chayetze b'hem, etc. Shaptur mitnei shal lechem gazeh loknu amotzi birchas hamazon. They kfiyas suda because bread like this, cornbread would be another case, but it doesn't look like. It doesn't look like the bread in which they're I'm sorry. On this bread, it is bread. Looks like bread. But there's not that bread in which they're misaki and hamotzi, except by if you made it a formal meal. Havabelu show you lechem, but these which were bread, these batloy they purim, and they were now negated by making them into crumbs or morsels. Vabishu adibuk atigum was batloy they purim. Vabishu adibuk atigum miktaras lechem. This process of taking the morsels and cooking or gluing or frying them together removes them from the category of bread. Ein al zeh shein lechem klal. It doesn't have the name bread at all. Lo shayach aleim birchas hamotzi birchas hamazon. We'll make a motzi birchas hamazon. The koshkim b'tikunei kemach shalonu, especially with our fried flour, kamo kreplach, blintzes, and pamposkes, whatever that is. Shein ban bra birchas hamotzi birchas hamazon. It's only mazonos and michya. I feel like if you ate many of them. Which ain't shem lechem al zeh cloud has no status as bread whatsoever. Lamites yesh misham, those who say there is one who says, I should say, the pure and shem be'em kazayis, that morsels are less than kazayis shenosim b'mayim, which put in water. B'mayim mislabni machmas purim, and the water gets white because of the color takes on the color of the even substance of the morsels. Came to shor rabei shos, such as when you soak them for many hours. Halach me'em tor lechem, they no longer have the countenance of bread. Ve'em barach aleim al breim mezonos, u'brichas me'en shosh, and these morsels you make mezonos and hamichya. V'afilu shor b'mayim sonim, even in cold water. V'lo yu b'mayim meisleis, weren't there for 24 hours. Shneim ar kovash and busho, that we can say, well, it's pickled like as if it was cooked. Since they lost the countenance of bread, and the morsels less than kayas, kazayas v'koshkein, and certainly if you soak them in hot water, then in a short amount of time they're going to lose the countenance of bread. Those who take a piece of bread which they dry on coals and they dunk it in whiskey, penance, and they call these things panas. Nami dina hachi. That's also, they say this halacha, and this evidently the Magen Avraham, the name of the Shloah Kodesh. Says Arukh HaShulchan, "Ve'eni yodea perush." I don't know what this means. The panets shalanu are panets, which we dry in a hot oven. Because suchares, hareim pas gomer, they are absolutely bread. The Yotzei matzah shwei haki say that if it's soaked, it's still motzi. Then how Yotzei with soaked matzah? Seems that such matzah should not make a motzi. The Shlomar came with gon sheish papusas kazayis. And by the matzah, we're talking about a case where the morsels still have a kazayis. This year, Pesach comes out on Shabbos, and of course, that is what many people have the minute to do, is to soak their matzah in soup so it doesn't have a taste of matzah, and then use it in the morning of Shabbos or Pesach. And as long as they're the size of kazayis, they still retain the hamotzi status, even though they were soaked. In front of Mardamus, ain't sure it's a matzah shel tov tzuras, and of course we don't soak the matzah until it loses its countenance as matzah. The Mishnah Berurah says that those who pick a piece of bread that they dry on coal with whiskey, or maybe it's beer, and they don't have a gazayas, and the beer or whiskey gets white by the soaking, so that also make a bar name zonos. I don't think we have these pastries or the nowadays. Mem, there's one who says should pass a shori behind adam, that bread which is soaked in red wine, and it's soaked pass adam until the bread becomes red. It no longer has the category of bread. Shabbat Russell lost its countenance for kapasa barbekistin, and it's like kapasa barbekistin. The Birkasam Mazonis men Shoshim lo achas hu kavua mimenu. And it's Mazonis hamicha unless you made a formal meal of it. Mishnah Berurah, the Bir Halacha, is not clear about this. He said just because it turned red, it's difficult to make halacha l'maisa. Mishnah also says that if you're dunking the bread and the wine in order to drink the wine, that means you want to eat and drink it together, then it's best to make a bracha on a little bit of wine by itself, and to make a separate bracha on the bread which is soaked. And again, according to Arukh HaShulchan, it seems to be more makel. Here it would be mazonos. According to the Mishnah Berurah, you probably should take another piece of bread and make a motzi on it. But it says Arukh HaShulchan as well, this is only if the bread broke apart, or or a morsel is going to have a gazayis. Even if they have, because if they have a gazayis, even in cooking they don't lose the status of bread. The koshka machine is certainly soaking. Bracha yain ain't tzarich, unlike the Mishnah Berurah, he says you don't need a bracha on the wine. Because making mazonos on the bread which is soaked in the wine, and that exempts the wine which is absorbed into it. Although could be the Mishnah Berurah and Arukh HaShulchan talk about different cases. Arukh HaShulchan talk about a case where you want the flavored bread, and Arukh HaShulchan and the Mishnah Berurah talk about a case where you want wine through the bread. Fine distinction, but a distinction. By the time it does sefta, or is v'yayin, klomar yayin shayim move laboris with yam wine soaked into rice. Or is make a bracha on the rice. Upoter esayin exempts the wine. Kedin ikar shapoter satfela, like the primary, which exempts the secondary. Chenim kamanasu rakim tzotzayin shebisa. Oh, here it is. So perhaps this is the similar thing to Moshe Berurah. Therefore, his kavanah is only to the tzotzayin to suck out the wine shebisocho, which is in the bread. Mebarach yayin bari priya gofen. Right? The chiluk is mechalik. You can also shneim, if the kavanah is on both of them, shneim etzli korim, they're both primary, but baruch Hashem, make a bracha on each one, on both of them. The Shabur has a discussion, doesn't tell us what he says, about somebody who dunks his cake in coffee. Presumably that there too you want both. We're going to get this. And the same status for any beverage which is absorbed into foodstuffs. Mishnah Berurah says that this is only if it's soaked. The bread is soaked in the beverage. But if there's just moisture on the outside, that's not doesn't have the same status. Of course, the it's not soaking is a higher level of saturation. V'im mefarak tzas lechem dak b'mashke, if you pulverize a little bit of bread into a beverage, for the purpose of giving a taste to the beverage and not for the purpose of the bread, no make a bracha at all on the bread, because of course it becomes tafel to the beverage, which is primary.